There is what they call a dongle. The dongle for the keyboard is back there, so that's how we're able to use the wireless keyboard. And then we have a water bottle holder here. It's important that we use distilled or some sort of filtered water with the endoscope for cleaning, as well as for the bottle for use. The unit will kind of boot up like a computer, if you will. I'm just going to turn it off so you can see what it just takes a couple minutes for it to turn on. And we will see the on-off switch here. And when it's connected to power, you'll have that one red light there, and then when it's on, it'll turn green and go through a boot up process and come to kind of that home screen. How nice of you to join us.
You said it's starting at the time.
It's not one of our employees.
That's right.
Please have some donuts, yes.
Oh, gosh.
So there's a progress bar here. I don't know if you pay attention, but it does take a good 2 minutes or so for the unit to start up. Well attended, that's a good sign. Alright. Let's pivot this a little bit. There we go. Okay, so our endoscopy equipment has turned on now successfully. And we'll go ahead and talk about the endoscope briefly. The endoscope has a couple areas that are identifiable. The part that goes to the patient is called the insertion tube. So this part has, inside of it, has a large instrument channel, which is also the suction channel. And then at 12 o'clock there's the camera, essentially, which is an imaging chip. It's got headlights, and then the metal hood area is where insufflation and irrigation come out, so you can insufflate the GI tract and also irrigate. The irrigation is designed to clear the lens, it's not designed to do anything else. My point is there's a lot going on kind of in a small scope, so this is delicate, really important that it's cared for properly. The next part, besides the insertion tube, is our instrument channel right here. These sealing caps are designed so that you keep the pressure and you run the instrument right through that black cap. That can come off, but you would, under normal usage, have that black cap there and run your instrument through there. The instrument channel is shared with the suction channel, so if you have an instrument in there or this cap open, your suction will be diminished, so you should close it or try to cover it with your thumb to get optimal suction. Next we have our handpiece here. The handpiece has two wheels for deflection. The big wheel is up-down deflection. Little wheel is right-left deflection. Each direction has a locking mechanism. So if you did want to lock the deflection back, you can use that lever right there, and that's called a brake. So now the scope is locked there if you want to go behind the soft pallet or something like that. The lock for the right-left deflection is right here, so that those would be engaged. If you go to then drive the scope and you notice it's stiff, you might want to just check to make sure that the brake is not engaged to allow for easy deflection. Next we have blue button. The blue button is cannulated, so one function is insufflation, the other is irrigation, so your finger over the blue button is insufflation, and for suction. And then back here we have another blue button, a gray and black, and those are more accessory buttons for like taking pictures and things like that. We're going to kind of skip over that right now. But the main operation buttons are these blue and red buttons, and those just pull off for cleaning, and we'll cover that when we go through cleaning. Last part of the scope is our our umbilical cord here. This will line up and plug right into the telepack. There's some stuff going on here. This is our light post, so this is where the light goes into the scope. This is where the air goes into the scope, this smaller post. This is our water bottle connection right here. It's our suction connection. And this is protecting our video electronics right here. So important that this cap is on when we clean the scope. It's important that we test the scope before and after use. So we line up the silver dot there to the white dot, attach, turn 90 degrees, and we do this process called leak testing with the manometer. Pumping up into the blue area, about 180 millimeters of mercury, and you want to wait 5 minutes to see if the scope loses 10 millimeters of mercury over 5 minutes. So you will notice a leak right away if it does happen. The scope usually moves straight down, but the scope is holding pressure. It's also recommended to deflect the scope when you are in the leak test process. Once you are confident the scope holds pressure, then you can use the scope and you can clean the scope. So very important process right there, the leak testing before and after. So now we'll take our endoscope, we'll orient the light post here, plug it into the telepack, and that just goes straight back in. We have a couple connections. We have our water bottle connection, which goes right here. Our video connection, which goes right here. And the video connection cable has a white dot, and when we took off the soaking cap here, there's a white dot again on that housing that we connect. And then we make the connection to the telepack. So video cable to scope, water bottle to scope, and the final connection would be the suction. So this is your surgical suction that you have in the surgery room right now. I think you have some other ones too. But so it's just straight suction tubing would go right there. Now on the telepack we have some controls here to affect our image. This icon light bulb is for light, so if we push that button we'll turn our light on. See the tip of the scope now has light coming out of it. We do something called white balancing the scope, which is calibrating the scope to the light source. We want something white, non-reflective, like a piece of paper or gauze, and we white balance by pushing this button and having everything connected and turned on, and it'll give you that message saying that it's been successful. So now we have light, we have white balance our scope. The next thing we need to do is turn on our pump to use the endoscope. This is the icon is a balloon being filled up, and so we turn the pump on. The telepack has about 3 levels of air that we can enact. So first it's turned on, then we're at 2/3 and 3/3. So depending on how much air you want, you can control that. If I push it again, it'll go down or up. To turn it off, you would hold that button for 3 seconds. A little counter will come up, and then it'll turn off. So that interface is similar for the light as well. If I wanted to turn that off, I'd hold the button down for 3 seconds, and then that icon would go away. So on 1/3, 2/3, 3/3. On 1/3, 2/3, 3/3. The other icons we have are a digital zoom, which is nice to have, but probably something you don't need clinically too much. So if we just push that button, it'll enact digital zoom. This next icon gets rid of all the icons on the screen. So if for some reason that is bothersome to you, you can get rid of them by pushing that button. And then the final icon along the bottom takes us to the patient management information. So if we record images or videos and things like that, that'll show up there. But first, to have images, we need to put something on the flash drive. All the information is saved to the flash drive. There's no internal hard drive or anything like that. Everything goes to the flash drive, so you need to have a flash drive connected. To enter patient information, we can use these arrows up here and go to new patient, or you could hit Control N if you wanted to as well, and that should pull up this box here where we can enter some patient information or complete patient information. So once you have something in there, you can go back and edit it, but you need to put something in there to get the case started. As soon as you have FIFO in there, now these icons are active. So you have the camera icon, the freeze icon, the video start and stop icon, the audio recording icon, so you could hook it up to a microphone and record as you're going through the pylorus. And then this icon is just that certain patient. So this is everything. This icon is a series of folders, so that's all the information on the flash drive. And this single folder is just this one patient. So to take videos, we would just hit, you can hit this button from the actual console, or you could have somebody use the keyboard and just hit the icon here as well to turn it off or on or take a picture. And then we will quickly set up taking pictures. And this is something that we do not need to. So now the gray button from the endoscope back here will take a picture, and the black button will record video. So the user can do it as well, the keyboard or from the unit itself. You can do it 3 different places.
Is that set up now all the time?
Yeah, it should be just a turn on, essentially. So you can see the imaging is outstanding. We'll go into that particular record now, and we'll see we have the patient data, so you can put like took biopsies or whatever patient information is relevant for the case. You have your, you can grab a still picture, or if it's like a long video, you could mark it so that you know exactly where to go. So it's got a little playback portion on it there. And that's how you go back to the live, was that back arrow. And then this is the overview of all the information on the flash drive. So that's a real quick kind of overview of attaching it, the features that you'll most commonly need on the Telepack. There's a lot of sophistication to it, but I don't think it's worthwhile to go into those features really.
What format does the video save in?
MPEG, JPEG.
Is that openable with
It's-
Apple?
Yeah, open with Apple or, so it has this nice little report format in it. And then some people will create that as a PDF and then email that to a client, or you can load it into Cornerstone or Avmark or whatever you guys use. Any other questions on what we just went over there as far as setup, leak testing, basic features of the endoscope, basic features of the Telepack?
Can you go over leak testing again?
Yes. So for leak testing, really with leak testing, what we're making sure is that the internal parts of the scope are protected when we immerse the scope or use the scope. So when we leak test, the only thing that needs to happen is that this cap is on the scope. We can have the buttons off here, or this valve, or this sealing cap off here. That's fine. We can have the scope even connected to the machine. The only thing that we need to have to pass is this cap needs to be on. So this soaking cap needs to be on. We need to attach the leak tester. It's got a little pin there, so we have a little groove, and that goes in place and then twists and locks in place. And then we pressurize to about 180. There's a blue zone represented on the gauge here. And then wait 5 minutes, and it's holding very tight.
And you said that that cap has to be on while it's being cleaned?
This cap has to be on while it's being cleaned. This leak testing has to be done, should be done before you do it, to verify that the scope is holding pressure. So if for some reason this was off when we immerse the scope, which certainly has happened, The scope basically is like putting your iPhone 6 before it was waterproof, like straight into a pool or something, or your TV into a pool, expecting it to work. So it's basically opening it up to all electronics to water, basically, which the scope doesn't like. So maybe we'll talk about the cleaning process now. Okay, so cleaning the scope, so I guess we'll talk about water again. So in here we have water, distilled water, some sort of purified water, bottled water is fine. And then usually when we set up to do a procedure, you'd want water also kind of at the side of the patient. And the scope has a couple things that it needs to do to be able to see inside the patient. One is we need to have an image, and so we saw when we had an image on the screen that the scope is imaging fine. The other is that the scope deflects. Deflection is meaning that the scope can move up and down and left and right, and so the big wheel controls up and down and left and right, and so it's a good idea to make sure that those are working before you get inside the patient. The other thing that is important that you have before you get inside the patient is insufflation, irrigation, and suction. So we would want this scope completely hooked up. And we call this kind of pre-checking the scope. So you'd have a bowl of water, you'd turn the pump on and verify that by putting the scope into a bowl of water, verifying that you have bubbles when you put the finger over the tip of the blue button, and also verifying that you have irrigation by depressing the blue button, and verifying that you have suction. So those are three things that you would need to check by having a bowl next to the patient. Similarly, once you're done with the procedure, you also want to verify that those things are working. You want to verify that you still have insufflation, irrigation, and suction. So we essentially are going to repeat that process. When we do it after the procedure, we call it pre-cleaning. And so pre-cleaning involves, again, verifying that we have insufflation by making sure we still have bubbles. When we put the tip of the scope into a fluid into the bowl of water, verifying that we have irrigation when we lift it up and depress the blue button, and verifying that we still have suction. So we put the tip of the scope into the bowl, hold the red button down, and our suction tubing is clear, so we want to make sure that we have suction going through the scope, and then we'd also wipe off the shaft of the scope. So those are the kind of four things. Do we have bubbles? Do we have irrigation? Do we have suction? And then wiping off the shaft of the scope. That's imperative to do as part of the procedure. We consider pre-cleaning to be as like part of the procedure and should be done immediately after every single case. Once you've done the pre-clean part, the rest of the cleaning process can be done like in a reprocessing instrument area where you have a little bit more space, and it doesn't need to be done immediately. We recommend the pre-cleaning be done immediately, and then the more thorough cleaning be done, within the hour or something when you can get to it. If it's immediate, great. If it's a little bit later, that's fine. Understand there's a lot going on, but the pre-cleaning, we say, has to happen kind of as part of the procedure. So you do have an endoscope here, and we recommend getting 2 cases about the size of the endoscope case here, just tubs essentially. One tub is going to have the cleaning solution, and one tub will have the water. So what you guys do right now? Something like that? Okay. And you guys know what cleaning solution? You guys use all the right cleaning solutions? Good.
Well, not the people that are new in here do
Yeah,
not
they
know
don't
any of
know.
this, so they need to
Okay.
be educated.
There's 5 people who know about this.
Okay, okay.
Everyone else does not.
We know you know Drew.
And I think we can make different.
I don't even know.
So I think it's the second time I've said, but the water is very important, so the filtered water. The cleaning agent's also very important, so we always recommend neutral pH enzymatic cleaner. We have any Germans here?
Let me just say something. You'll wanna use the the distilled water on this because anything else
Time. The endoscope is much more sensitive than the other surgical instrumentation they have in the hospital. It does need to be cared for. Like Dr. Babiak's saying, the tolerance on this scope is very small, right? It's a soft scope. There's channels in here that are very sensitive. It's really important that we use the right materials and that we follow through the sequence of cleaning, which is outlined here. So I will let somebody look at it, but basically, step 1 is the pre-clean, what we just talked about as far as wiping down the scope, irrigating, aspirating, and then transporting the scope to an area where we have more space for cleaning. Then with the leak test, which we've gone through, next is the manual cleaning of the scope, which is, again, after the scope has been 100% cleaned, we're going to have a tub of solution, and it doesn't need to be, completely immersed. It's just enough fluid to actively clean the scope. We're going to pull the buttons off the scope, so the blue button, the red button pull right out. The biopsy valve pulls off, and we're going to use these attachments here to flush the cleaning solution into the scope. So we'd want a 60 cc syringe or something like that, and we want to flush about 200 mils through the scope, basically, and these buttons fit right on to the working ports here. And then we just use our syringe, flush through here 2 or 3 times, flush through here 2 or 3 times. We're putting the enzymatic cleaner inside the scope. We wipe off the outside of the scope as well. Then we take these adapters off. And we run our cleaning brush.
Now, when the cleaning cap is on there, that whole scope is immersible.
Correct. That's what we're doing when we leak test it. We're making sure that that's that can happen. And so the whole scope, you could have solution up to here if you wanted to, but again, usually it's a little bit there. We have our cleaning brush. Anything we pass through the scope, we want to take a second and make sure that there's no kinks on it, that there's actually bristles on the brush. I know we're in veterinary medicine and we like to have things last for a long time, but if there's no bristles on the brush or if there's kinks on the instrument, it's better to replace those things than to try to use it. So there's 3 different places where we pass the brush. The first is straight down in the red button here, and when we pass the brush, we're just passing it all the way through the scope. We don't go back and forth toothbrush style, we just go past the brush all the way down through the scope. So we're cleaning the suction line here. Then we're going to come out the working end of the scope. We would clean the brush off, clean the bristles off, and then pull the brush back through the scope. The second pass is going to be back through this red hole as well, but we're going to angle the brush to go down through the umbilical cord. So we angle the brush a little bit towards me here, and that'll then pass down through and it'll come out here at our little Christmas tree adapter. So the brush comes out right here as well. And then our third pass is going to be down through the instrument channel. Right down here. So 3 passes of the brush. Once we're done with the brush, we put it away, and now we move the entire endoscope into our bag. And we're going to reattach those attachments and then flush water through the scope. So basically what we did is introduce the soap into the endoscope, we brush the scope, and now we're going to rinse the scope, reattach these attachments, flush probably 4 or 5 times with distilled water or DI water through the scope. So flush, 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 wipe off the outer part of the scope. Now we're going to take the entire scope, put it on some towels. Now we're going to dry the scope. We're just going to use a syringe of air, just pass that through, try to get all the water out of the scope, dry off the outside part of the endoscope as well. And then it would be recommended to disconnect these and hang the scope up, like out of place in a safe area, hanging. The buttons, you do want to make sure the buttons are clean. Do colonoscopy or something like that, they get pretty dirty. There is a, I just skipped over this little brush right here. There's this little brush here for these ports here where the buttons do come out. So that's what that brush would be used for. And then for the buttons, a little toothbrush where something is good. And also taking a look to make sure that the O-rings are in place as well. So you just notice that how it looks right now. But when you're cleaning the scope, keep an eye on that. These do not need to be lubricated.
Does it come with replacement O-rings, at least the starter kit?
Not.
So we'll
What is
need
that
to order
up there?
some?
No, over here.
Oh, that's for a biopsy.
This was the suction button, I'm sorry. So these are the 2 working buttons right here.
Okay, then what's the other one?
This is a button that goes over the
Blue?
blue button, and so when I talked about the pre-cleaning and verifying that we have insufflation irrigation, this button could be put in place of the blue button and will constantly open up those valves, and so you don't have to switch between putting your finger over it and pressing the button. So it would be used for the cleaning process. Instead of putting your finger over the blue button and depressing to verify that you have irrigation suction, this button would go in place and would do both those things at the same time. So it's called a cleaning valve. So the red one, they look very similar. The red one would be just for that pre-cleaning segment right there, whereas this one is needed for operation. Should point that out.
Do the buttons need to be cleaned with the enzymatic cleaner as well with the rest of the scope?
Yes, yeah, I usually just immerse them in there as well, yeah.
So just for clarification on the immersion, that black cap has to be on the end, and that entire thing, this part can be immersed, right?
There's black cap, we need to leak test the scope. If the whole
Leak
scope
test
holds
first.
leak test and the cap stays on the whole time, then the scope should be immersed.
Even the other part,
The entire part could be put underwater.
whether or not those tubes are connected.
Correct, whether or not those tubes are connected, whether or not this button's connected.
Okay.
This cap is what's making the scope watertight or not. As well as if there's a tear in the channel or something like that, but we're verifying that there's no tears when we do the test. We have some instruments too. So just like with the cleaning brush, you want to make sure that these have no kinks, and when you pass them into the endoscope, the scope's not deflected. That if we meet resistance, we kind of figure out where things are inside the patient. Sometimes pulling out a little bit and then pass the instrument through the tip of the scope is necessary, though not what you want to do. And then the technician should be familiar with how the instrument opens and closes. So usually it's a 2-person job, so you want to be familiar with how the instrument opens and closes. and that you make sure that the person driving the scope tells you to open and close the instrument, and that you can see the instrument on the screen when you do that, so you're not doing it inside the scope. Anything else, Dr. Babiak, that you think of? Some of the basics, yeah?
You just wanna make sure that that instrument is, not acting like a saw inside the scope. So anytime it's deflected and you're trying to shove it through there, it's gonna be digging a trench in the scope, and then it's gonna leak test as not being usable or cleanable. So you just wanna make sure it's relaxed and you put your instrument through the channel, and then you can do all your flexing and sampling. You wanna minimally abrade the inside of the scope, because that's where the damage occurs when you're using it to remove things or biopsy things. So, if it doesn't wanna go, don't force it.
Where's the blue button? I think that's it for me, unless we have some questions. I mean, definitely, I think yes, somebody should do some hands-on here.
I have one question. For when we're flushing it out with the enzymatic cleaner, does it need to be diluted, or is it just the straight solution?
Diluted per the guidelines, yeah.
Just making sure.
Do you put it to the enzymatic and water mode, or do you dilute it all?
I dilute it all,
That's what
and
I
then
usually do.
we have another one
Okay.
full of distilled water.
Sure,
Somebody
maybe
get up
someone
there
set
and
it
start
up, normally.
We can go